thank you for that lengthy introduction. Might help us to skip a slide or two and make up for time, because I know a couple of colleagues need to catch a flight today. Apologies, because I might be repeating a number of messages, ideas of my previous speakers here, because at the end we all provide finance, slightly different from institution to institution, but I will try to jump on those slides where we are touching very similar content, let's say. So I plan to introduce DG, and then I will introduce a couple of instruments that we have that are somewhat special and can be used in the coffee sector. But maybe to introduce us just a bit further than we've just heard. So we're part of KfW Banking Group. I don't know how familiar you are with the German development or cooperation setup. We have our colleagues at GIZ who are responsible for technical cooperation, so simply. Then we have KfW Group, which is responsible for the financial cooperation. And there's two institutions. One is KfW Development Bank, which is, again, to put it simple, responsible for the state-to-state cooperation. And then there's DG, the company I work for, where we focus on the promotion of private sector development. Not because KfW is very keen on the private sector, but because we believe that the private sector has a good role to play in terms of development. The portfolio, just to cut the figures here short, is at 7 billion, of which, as you said, Chairman, 750 million are invested into ag. So our mandate is to finance sustainable projects of the private sector or companies in most coffee origins. I mean, we wouldn't finance a project in Hawaii, we wouldn't finance a project in Australia, but any other coffee origin that you can imagine is eligible for DG financings in the different forms that I will present. For the normal finance arm that DG has, we provide loans, we provide equity, long-term investments with a tenure of 4 to more or less 15 years, depending on the structure. It's additional by definition. We always like to see an investment by the private sector, of course. We want skin in the game, and we also like to finance together with other commercial banks or other development financing institutions. The sectors, as I said, can be agribusiness, and we like that a lot, but it's also the financial sector, it's infrastructure, etc. Besides our financing, we offer additional services. There is technical assistance, for example, in the coffee sector. If we were to finance a trader, he might struggle with compliance in the area of environmental and social standards. We have the means with our technical assistance programs to support them in not only aiming for compliance, but for compliance. And then we also have special programs. It's a special department at DG, because typically in this type of finance we invest own funds, which we raise at capital markets, but we also have some limited programs where we manage programs for third-party donors. Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, as we mentioned, Chairman, is one example, but the German government typically is also a partner we work with. Okay, for our core financing offers, we have different instruments, and they're typically tailor-made because every project is a bit different, and they vary from loans to equity. So we could look at a very, let's say, risk-averse structure, which could be a guaranteed loan, but we also go to a full risk participation. We would invest into a company, we would take equity. We're not entrepreneurs, so we wouldn't take quite a lot of the risk. And for those members present who have ideas and have private sector partners who want to invest in but aren't able to fully invest into a project finance structure, we are willing to look at the different options, from loans to risk participation. Okay, just briefly, again, a lot of numbers. So our locations, as I said, we can work globally apart from Europe and the US. And we do like to work a lot in Africa. That's a strategic focus of ours, but we also work in Asia and Latin America or Central and Eastern Europe. We have a couple of offices also oftentimes in coffee origins. For example, Nairobi, for example, Mexico City, and many others more. What I just mentioned are the classic financing instruments we could provide, but as I said, we also manage third-party funded programs and special programs. One of them is a program we call upscaling. That's quite a unique program because quite often you realize that yes, grants are available for certain projects with a developmental impact, and then there's classic loans and equity, more commercially orientated. Those type of funds are quite abundant, but what we realize is that there are companies who sort of don't really need a grant anymore because they, if all goes well, they're ready to pay back on a loan, but sometimes the risk is so high that they won't receive a loan. The risk profile just doesn't meet the appetite of those funding them. So what we've developed, and this is fairly new, we've done this for a year now, is a program called Upscaling, where we would finance this type of a project, and if all the success criteria that we would define at the outset of such a planning of a project, if they are met, if the project is successful, then this grant is repayable. If they're not met, because the risks actually are materialized, then this turns into a grant and doesn't need to be paid back. So that might be of help if you would want to invest into innovative new ideas in the coffee sector, but where the risk is maybe too high for a commercial or a development finance institution. It is somewhat limited in terms of finance, so we could finance up to 500,000 euros of such a project, and maximum of 50% of the total investment. What we do like to see here, again, is skin in the game. We would like to see the private sponsors of such a project to invest 25% of such a project, and then there's room for other investors, be it commercial banks, be it other partners. So this is one opportunity, and an example for that is a company called BioWin Agro Research in India. Just open this up. It's a company that works in a number of different crops, coffee being one of them. And with them we've invested into a factory and also in a type of an outgrowing scheme. So a combination of investment and then working with smallholder farmers. As I mentioned, 0.5, that's the upper limit of 0.5 million euros as a repayable grant. And this is currently aiming to help support 10,000 farmers. I cut the rest short, but those of you who are interested in more information, I'm happy to provide that later on. We have another program which we manage for the German government, which is called Develop DE, with 3 capital Ps, because it's a public-private approach. So the public side, of course, is the German government wanting to support a developmental project with high impact. And the private side, of course, is what we at DG always need, is a private sector contribution here. Very small projects are those we would be looking at here. We can co-finance up to 200,000 euros, and again, up to 50% of such a project. We do always want the incentive to be there that the private sector actually performs in the project that they present to us. Okay, these type of projects, they have to show a certain developmental impact. They need to be somewhat different to the core business of the company. So unlike our core financing that we would provide, here we're looking at ideas which are not the core of their business. But what we can look at, and for the coffee sector that's of interest, is to help private sector companies to invest into their supply chain. Maybe even organize a supply chain and support smallholder farmers, which we do like to do, and which we've done in one specific context, which is a cooperation with the trader Shooter, where we work in the Democratic Republic of Congo to support 2,000 producers. We've done some similar work with them in the past, and there we aim at supporting them to improve productivity and to improve quality. Mainly, this is I'd say a classic approach, and we'll see another one like that in a minute, where we look at gap training and seedling distribution to improve productivity. We look at post-harvest practices, and also installing wet mills and dry mills to improve the quality, and also to obtain traceability and organic certification. This is a grant of 200,000 euros, and the tenure is 2 years. The tenure for this type of project is between 2 and 3 years, just so you know. It's probably a limitation, because if we see work in the coffee sector, we often come across tenures that are 3 years, 4 years, but we realize that the work that we want to do actually takes a lot more time to develop great impact. I think that's some homework for all of us to look at the tenures in the long run, but the way it stands now, these are the tenures that we can provide. Another example of a PPP, but more a philanthropic private partnership, is the Coffee Partnership for Tanzania. There we manage a grant for the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation in the coffee sector of Tanzania. With this grant, we aim to support 90,000 farmers, as the chairman already had introduced. And by doing so, we aim to improve the livelihoods of more than 500,000 smallholder family members in Tanzania. The objective of the grant is to improve productivity and quality, improve yields, and thus, in the long run, improve income of the smallholder farmers, all leading to improved livelihoods. Maybe just an indication on how we plan to do this, and I'll mention later on with whom we work, because I and my colleagues, we're not agronomists, we're not coffee experts, we're more from the finance side of things. So this grant aims to improve the livelihoods of 90,000 smallholder farmers, again looking at productivity improvements, looking at quality improvements. The basis for all of our work is to help farmers organize in strong registered groups. And then we would follow up on that by helping our partners to train on good agricultural practices, on basic business skills, on the distribution of new seedling varieties that are resistant to a number of pests and diseases, thus reducing the volatility. And we also, and that's the most ambitious area, I think, and you might see that in many projects as one of the complicated areas. One activity we want to do is to establish an improved access to finance for smallholder farmers and their producer organizations. Then increasing coffee quality through CPUs is another measure for quality, and wherever it is sensible, promote certification under the renowned certification schemes you all know better than I do. And how do we do this? I said earlier that we're not the implementers of such a grant. We work together with strong partners, either from Tanzania or from the international sphere. We work together with Dan & Associates, a Tanzanian coffee trader, but we also work together with Coffee Management Services, Neumann Foundation, Olam, Tembo and Tutunza, big traders whom many of you will know. But these are just the implementers. We have quite an intensive engagement of all stakeholders who have an interest that these projects are successful. Of course, the Tanzanian government, the ministry and the coffee board are key players and sit on our advisory board, but also the TACRI, which is the Tanzanian Coffee Research Institute. And then we have a number of NGOs, donors, development partners who all form a body that advises us and monitors our implementation. This is just a quick example on how projects can look like. And that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.